Yes, I spent most of my working life as a seaman in the British Merchant Navy, serving on many of the great transatlantic liners, Queen Mary, Queen Elizabeth, many Cunard White Star ships and various other shipping companies out of Southampton. My name is David Haisman, and I'm the youngest son of Edith Haisman, who became the world's oldest living Titanic survivor at 100 years of age in 1996. I started off as a young seaman, and at that time I went up into the Canadian Labrador Straits into Quebec and Montreal on Cunard White Star, and it was then that I realised what it was like to be in an ice field and how it must have been for my mother in those days. I later served as a naval seaman and as a lookout man on the big ships of Cunard White Star, and that was a special job that had been brought about and paid for because of the Titanic, paid lookout men. Other shipping companies didn't have that. We would be up the crow's nest for 24 hours a day. On the big ships like the Queen Mary and Queen Elizabeth, those ships never reduced speed, and we used to have low-lying sea fog. And sometimes a beautiful day up in the nest, but you couldn't see the ship below you. Although smaller craft, you could see the tops of their masts if they were in the area. This happened quite frequently in the English Channel and across the Western Ocean. I used to lecture quite often by people who were interested in the Titanic story, and this was usually women's clubs and different organisations at dinners and so on, and I would speak for about an hour on mother's experiences and of course my own seagoing experience. I've had 8 brothers and 2 sisters. The eldest is 20 years older than me, and I was born in 1938. I'm always open to invitations to people who are interested in the Titanic story and much of what must have gone on in those days, especially on the seamanship side of things. And I'm always open to any questions on that. There's quite a lot that did happen that a lot of authors just do not understand or know about. My mother, as a young girl, of course, was very close to her own mother. As girls were in that Victorian time, she's very Victorian in their outlook, and she would have stayed with her, always being with her mother on board the ship and what have you. She did have a bit of a fascination, because she was 15 years of age, at the bellboys, who were somewhat, 1 or 2 may well have been younger than her. And she did mention them to us as kids, and sometimes when we spoke about Titanic, and used to say some of these boys should never have left home. They took up friendship on board with the Reverend Carter and his wife Lillian, and they were dining companions on board the ship. One certain aspect that happened on board the ship during the emergency procedures was the Reverend Carter was going to help Thomas, my grandfather, to help to get the ladies in the lifeboat, but said first of all he would take Lillian to her boat and then come back and help Thomas to put the 2 ladies in lifeboat 14. Well, he did just that, and many months later, or weeks later, after they were in New York, they went around all the hospitals to see if Thomas had survived, and they were surprised to find that Lillian's lifeboat, all had survived but not her, and they often wondered if perhaps, being from a religious family, her husband being religious, she may well have gotten out of the boat again to be with him. Mother always found that extraordinary. Where was Lillian Carter when the rest were saved, especially after he had placed her in the boat? In they stayed in New York for a few weeks. When she was there, they went to the Women's League, who looked after them, and they bought her a lovely fur coat and some new boots, her beautiful black button-up boots that she wore, which she bought in London and she wore on a lifeboat. Of course, had been damaged by the seawater in the bottom of the boat. She always moaned about that. I had a good laugh about that. But in New York, of course, they were there for a few weeks, and then they took that long train journey for 3 days right across to Seattle. When they arrived in Seattle to see their Aunt Josephine, as she was in those days, that's the relative to Thomas, they decided that as Thomas has now gone down with the ship, grandfather, that it wouldn't be much point in staying in Seattle. And after a month or two, they took that long journey back to New York and sailed back to Liverpool, passing again close by the Titanic site. How that must have felt for them. And arriving in Liverpool, then down to Southampton, boarded the Carisbrooke Castle, I believe, and ended up in Cape Town, where there was money left. And of course, Thomas's son from his first marriage, who was going to have the watch that has been found and claimed to be his, which is very questionable, wanted his share of the money that had been left. And it was all sorted out that had several amounts of money left in different wine and brandy companies, and they finally got their payoff and they moved up to Johannesburg. Well, in Johannesburg, the Titanic, of course, was a very, very newsworthy item in their local press, and it came out on one newspaper. I've got that paper's headline, I'll get it to you later, that they would carry out a competition for safety at sea. For anyone who can come up with the best view of life saving at sea, there would be a prize from the newspaper. Well, one young man by the name of David Haisman, only 18 years of age at that time, I think, he put in his plan. He was a young draftsman and he won first prize. And his idea, which unusually, extraordinarily, is carried out today, mainly because all lifeboats now are shipped from the lower down the ship's side and not from the top deck. And that was his plan, his diagram he drew, where lifeboats being launched halfway down the ship's side and not from the top boat deck, as they used to be called. After winning that prize, he became very friendly with a man called Robert Hitchens, who was the quartermaster on the Titanic when she struck the iceberg. It wasn't long after that he was introduced to my mother at a function one night in Johannesburg, and that was Edith Brown. And after 6 weeks, a whirlwind romance, if you like, they married. And at the age of 22, mother and father returned to Southampton. The reason for this being, Southampton was undergoing a huge deep water berth scheme under the management of the chief docks engineer, Wentworth Shields. There was to be 10 deep water berths in Southampton to take the biggest ships in the world at that time. And my father, being a draftsman, was employed by that company, and that was one of the attractions. There was no work like that available in Johannesburg, and he knew that he had to get this sort of experience as a young draftsman, and this was his reason that he came back to England. Of course, mother came back, and this time they had a son, the eldest brother Fred, who was born in South Africa. It was my mother that made my father go to night school at the age of 26 to learn to be a engineering draftsman as well as just an ordinary draftsman. And Dad became an engineer and electrical draftsman, electrical engineering draftsman. And even in retirement he did a lot of work, freelancing. Quite a clever bloke, the old man. The rest of the family were born in Southampton. And Mother always remembered the Olympic coming into the port and getting new lifeboats, extra lifeboats. She remembers that well, going down to the docks with my father to see the Olympic and have our extra lifeboats being put on board. Many years later, one of my brothers, Leo, who was up on the Russian convoys in the Merchant Navy, he joined the Merchant Navy as a bellboy and wanted to go on the Aquitania, and Mother was dead against it. She said, whatever you do, make sure you know where your lifeboat is. Which was always a bit of a laugh, but there was no stopping him to go into sea like the rest of us. And Leo did a long time in the Merchant Navy before he left, and most of us brothers were in the Royal Navy or the Merchant Navy, with 2 in the Air Force. At the present time I'm living in Southampton. I was born there actually, travelled the world a great deal, lived in Australia for a number of years, and today I still live in Southampton. I've written 2 books on the Titanic. One is my autobiography, which goes on about my sea career and the links I've had with these ships that I've just explained. And the other, of course, is Mother's story, right from when she left South Africa as a young girl to travel to Seattle and to start a new hotel enterprise in Seattle after they sold theirs in Cape Town.